Blake, you've had on our list of topics for a long time, hate speech, and with no elaboration. And so with no elaboration, I was not very enthusiastic about recording a podcast about hate speech. Because I really don't understand, like, what's the point you're going for or something. And I've heard you kind of rant about it a few times, like not on the podcast. But I had a situation happen recently where I was discussing this topic, and I think we may intersect a bit and make an entertaining podcast. So I was with some friends. They're all mostly engineers from work. And we were drinking a bit and talking about stuff. And then somehow we got on the topic of Reddit several years ago when a bunch of channels got banned. And so Reddit went on this like mini crusade of banning some subreddits of things it deemed hate speech or undesirable for the community. And I remember one of the channels was like people would upload pictures of fat people and then everybody would just make rude comments about the picture. And so it was distinct from a channel like Roast Me, where somebody uploads their own picture and then invites people to make fun of it. So it was just, instead there were these random, I guess you might call them victims, except they probably didn't know they were victims of this. And everyone would just pile in and make rude comments. There was another channel where they would just watch videos and post pictures of people of certain races getting killed. So stuff like closed circuit TV footage of, a person of this race, and they're just like crossing a street and get hit by a car. And so they would post that in the channel, and that's all the channel was. And it had no redeeming value from the standpoint of, say you were into traffic safety, and so you wanted to study videos of pedestrian fatalities. And so you wanted a subreddit of pedestrian fatalities, you might do that. But this one was focused completely on death videos of people of one race. And so those things got banned, and we were discussing this, and I found myself in the position of being the only person in the room who said it's detrimental to free speech and it's detrimental to those ideas to ban those channels, regardless of the fact that those channels don't contribute anything in and of themselves, and they're not topics that most people are interested in. And I don't want to say they're not redeeming. I think there's some other way of saying that, like, because redeeming is subjective. But I found everybody disagreeing with me and saying, oh, yeah, it was fine to ban those things. And the reason I think that they shouldn't be banned, and this has nothing to do with the fact that Reddit is a private company and it can certainly ban anything it wants. It's its own little platform and walled garden and all that stuff, and they have control there. Mm-hmm. But there's another channel on Reddit called I'm Going to Hell. And I'm Going to Hell is humor that you think you might ought to feel bad for thinking is funny, right? So it's not nearly so bad as let's post pictures of fat people and make fun of them and derive humor from that. But it's, here's a picture of some kind of unfortunate situation and we'll make a witty joke about it. And, oh, I laughed at that, I'm going to hell. And I'm Going to Hell is much, much less objectionable than any of the things that got banned. But I worry that if we take the stance that, hey, this is hate speech, or rather, I think this is hate speech, not it is hate speech, but I think it is, and it should be banned, and you get people to go along with it because it's some highly objectionable thing that the majority of people think is bad, then that will snowball, and one day you'll be standing at the gates of, I'm going to hell, and you'll be defending that subreddit against the same kind of attitude. And you'll be defending the right to talk about certain topics that some people, I think over time, a smaller and smaller percentage of people think are objectionable and believe are hate speech. And you'll eventually lose more and more of your ability to discuss sensitive topics altogether.
So why do you think that this is related in any way to free speech?
Because people take their cues from all these other places. When you're online and you look at Reddit and you see, hey, Reddit banned this thing, and I think it was a good idea to ban this thing. Well, then you might think, it'd be a good idea if we just used the government to ban it for good. And we certainly face those challenges. I was doing a little bit of research about this, and there are still hate speech Supreme Court cases, like as recently as 2017. There was a Supreme Court case that revolved around hate speech and its definition. And so there are still dangers to people's right to free speech that come from the idea that hate speech is a thing, hate speech is universal, which it isn't, it's subjective, and that this needs to be dealt with in some way involving government force.
Okay. Well, if you could definitely demonstrate a causal factor there where platforms ban certain categories of speech and then it influences Supreme Court outcomes, then I would be all on board with this. But in general, I feel like a platform is well within its rights to exercise its own ability to speak or not speak by not reproducing the work of others. That's something that comes up a lot at YouTube, is people will be like, we're not really supporting free speech because we've banned these particular subreddits on YouTube. And everybody is like, this is a free speech issue. And I think that really the speech issue is, can YouTube be compelled to reproduce this video content on someone's behalf? Or are they in fact not obligated to do so? Which I think is the more correct case.
I agree that YouTube and Reddit are not obligated to reproduce this. I agree with that. And they're definitely within their rights to refuse to reproduce it. I think, though, that it is detrimental to the cause of free speech for them to go and engage in those activities.
Yeah. Although I do feel like increasingly free speech is turning into a politicized issue, which is really distressing. It seems like increasingly the left is against free speech and the right is for it, which seems kind of ridiculous to me. Like, coming from the vantage point of a libertarian, everyone should just be in favor of free speech, and pretty much the freer the better. But it's really disheartening to see. And it's because of terms like hate speech and this, I think, increasingly pervasive idea that people have some sort of right to never be offended or something like that. Like, my offense is your policy or something. It's your problem, really. And people are like, oh, if this makes someone feel bad, we should impose on everyone else in the entire world in order to make sure they don't feel bad. And so then you end up in this, I believe, situation's been called the tyranny of the most vocal minority. And it was originally talked about in terms of things like all foods will trend towards being halal and kosher, because it's like, well, you can make it normally or you can make it kosher with a slight bit of effort, and then, this minority of people won't complain to you anymore and they can buy this food. And so it's like, well, why not do that? And so if you have enough vocal minorities, they can influence policy in this way. And so if you have these groups of people that can make some strong enough claim at being offended at something, then they can alter policy. Another place I've been seeing that recently, that you probably haven't, is the use of master-slave terminology in databases. That's recently become...
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's become a problem in like open source projects and stuff. And there's this idea that information can be known by everybody, and that's one state, but that doesn't necessarily cause any action. Everyone has to know that everyone else knows the information, and that's when action can occur. And like the classic tale for that is the Emperor's New Clothes. Everyone can see that the Emperor's naked, right? That's a core part of the story. They can all see it, but they don't all know 100% that everyone else knows. And so then when the child says it, everyone really has this like two-phase process where they're like, he sees it too. And then they're like, no one's disagreeing. Everyone else sees it. And so then at that point, the whole crowd knows what's going on. And so I feel like it's sort of this inverse problem where it's like, is anyone offended? And they're like, maybe someone's offended. Maybe everyone's offended. Who knows? They're not going to say. And so it's like, let's pretend like maybe everyone could be offended by this, when in fact it's very, very few people who are like, I'm going to take up arms on behalf of no one in particular who said anything, and pretend like this is a really big problem. And look how virtuous it makes me look to care about something like this. And instead, I feel like it makes the person look like a jerk who's just like, let's all pay attention to me and my virtues instead of doing something useful.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of thing seems to be winning. And I think a lot of it's related to the way that people use internet communications mediums right now, like Twitter.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we've gotten to this point. I feel like 10 years ago, we saw the first couple of times somebody got doxxed. And we were like, huh. And we were like, yeah, but he was a jerk. And then now, like, doxing has ramped up to the point where it just happens all the time. Like, there's probably services you can hire to dox people, you know? And so then we look for, like, what's the next way that we can kind of, not so broadly as ruin the internet, but, you know, what's the next way that we can ratchet up the ridiculousness?
Oh, I know. For lack of a better term, it's like economic assassination or something. We, some minority on the internet, don't like this guy. Let's try and hurt them economically somehow. Let's get them fired from their job. Oh, they own their own business. Let's boycott their company. You know, oh, they're an independent contractor. Let's go to all of their customers and tell them that they're terrible and try to convince them to not work with them, or go to their biggest customer and boycott them or whatever. And everybody is like, let's try and financially harm this person as sort of a collective lynch mob because it makes us feel and look virtuous.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I feel like all of this pontificating about hate speech that happens now is an outgrowth of those earlier campaigns. It's like those campaigns kind of got exhausted, or they got boring, or it became too easy, or something. Or we just needed to ratchet up crazier and crazier ways to always be professing our virtue.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're at this point where everything is hate speech. If you want to homeschool your kid, that's hate speech. If you want to teach your kid how to shoot guns, there's some hate speech involved with that. Or you have guilt by association. You must be some terrible white ethno-nationalist racist thing and full of hate speech yourself. And again, what irritates me so bad about this is that, you know, some people will go to a subreddit like I'm going to hell, and some people would be upset by it. I don't want to say offended, because again, offended is a stupid idea. It's you trying to act virtuous, but you can be upset. And I think that most of the time when people get upset about something, they say they're offended. They're just upset. Okay, so you go to something like I'm going to hell, and you look at some picture, and maybe it's, you know, some poor handicapped kid, you know. And so you see that people are making a joke about that and then enjoying the joke, and it upsets you. Okay. There's a lot of people who could go and look at that, and they would say, either I found that joke funny and I'm not upset, or maybe I didn't even find the joke funny and I'm totally not upset. And so this idea of things being offensive or things being hateful is not universal. Like, people who are prone to categorizing things as hateful will try and make you believe that this is a objective fact that is hateful. And I don't agree with that. I think that the hatefulness is in the eye of the beholder. And I think there are a lot of things like, you know, this subreddit where you were just watching people get killed because of what race they were. There's nothing redeeming there, but I bet there's somebody out there who saw that and just didn't get upset about it. They didn't get upset, and so they didn't sit around groaning about, man, that's so hateful and awful, you know?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The other thing is when Reddit goes and they ban these subreddits, these people don't go away. And often when you have people on the fringe like this who are into these kind of things, their beliefs are only going to be reinforced by the fact that somebody like Reddit has banned them. They're going to say, yeah, look, we were right, and now we're being persecuted and we're martyrs. Where at least when you were containing them on Reddit, maybe you could have somebody try and influence them over time and say, you know, this is a behavior that is not productive.
I think Reddit went with that argument for a while. I think there was actually that argument that this is sort of containment and it gives them this place to hang out. but people have demonstrated, I believe using some simple machine learning stuff, they showed that in particular, the Donald, which is like Trump supporters, would spill out, and like the people in that subreddit would, or channel as you were calling it, would collectively organize to do stuff in other Reddits or get stuff voted to the top of the /all front page. So that meant that any just like casual visitor to Reddit would see it. And so part of that's just the way that Reddit works. And then part of it's the fact that a user can just move between subreddits, no problem. But I think they were finding that containment didn't really work. It created a community of ever more vociferous people who felt a particular way about a particular issue, and then they felt supported by others going and doing stuff on other parts of the site. And so I think their idea was, if we don't give them a haven on Reddit, then like they could collectively organize on another site and then come over here, but it's just a tiny bit of friction. And considering the things that they don't want them to do are like post a couple sentences of text, adding a little bit of friction to that is enough to prevent a whole lot of it. So I think containment might not be that feasible.
Okay, I think we may be talking past each other here. Mm-hmm. I'm saying more that we keep them on Reddit. Maybe we don't keep them trapped in that subreddit, since we can't. But we keep them from disappearing somewhere else deeper in the internet, where we cannot even try to challenge these people's ideas.
Well, what's deeper mean? I mean, they're going to go post, like, Vote, VOAT, is an alternative Reddit. And it's just full of the people who were banned from Reddit, basically. And so it's kind of a cesspool because it's like they were banned for a reason. You may not agree with the reason, but if it's just full of people who are banned, it's not going to be like
the best and brightest.
It's not going to be like the rational median groups in Reddit that you might enjoy. And so like they'll just move there, right? And that's another public website, and just anyone can go look at it. So it's not like containing them in a subreddit on Reddit was helping with the visibility into it.
But would you estimate that there are as many people on Vote who may be willing to participate in trying to change people's ways of thinking as there would be on Reddit?
No, because there's just more people on Reddit.
And so, if they end up, if the subreddit gets closed and they decide that they want to go to a place like Stormfront, which is like a white supremacist website, then there's probably not much chance at all once they land on Stormfront that they're ever going to be dissuaded of their views.
Well, I think they still could, but like, what should Reddit be doing at this point? You're talking about someone who's like on this path of different websites, and then they end up at Stormfront, and it's like, they're pretty far gone. I'm not sure that Reddit was going to set up some policy rules and write some code that was going to fix this person kind of fundamentally being a white supremacist. Like, do you think they could create the right set of Reddits and ban the right people and stuff like that? And then this person would have been like, you know what? I'm not a neo-Nazi or whatever. Like, I don't think so.
I'm simply saying that Reddit has foreclosed all opportunity for that.
Yeah, but also as a business, should they? I mean, I feel like what you're asking them to do is something that opposes their business principles.
I was thinking the community would do it. You would have people in the community who think, hey, this is a worthy cause. I will try to dissuade these people of these thoughts.
Reddit in particular doesn't really work that way, though. Each subreddit is a community. Like, in general, they're moderated by people selected from the community, and it's pretty hands-off from Reddit itself. Like, the advantage of that approach is that you can have, like, the pro-scub and the anti-scub party both existing on Reddit, and they both have their own subreddits, and both their subreddits are, like, civil but hate the other one. And that can actually work because you don't have some kind of global moderators. And so that's, like, a really nice thing about Reddit is it can contain conflicting viewpoints. And someone could even hang out in both subreddits, no problem, because their one account lets them just, like, bounce between them. But it also means there's not, like, greater community moderation outside of Ellen Powell steps in and just bans the subreddits entirely.
Okay.
Like, you can imagine during the election, the, like, 2016 election, you have, like, a Hillary subreddit and Donald Trump subreddit, and then you have, like, some kind of global moderation about what's okay to say, and that global moderator can step in and, like, be fair to both of these communities. That seems like It seems so unlikely.
Then you just end up with Slashdot.
Yeah, Slashdot does work on that model. I haven't looked at Slashdot in years, though.
It's a mess. I quit even reading it. I read it for like 12 years or something, and then I gave up.
I eventually saw $$ enough times that I was like, no, I'm good.
So you don't think that there's any useful containment argument here?
I don't know of it. That doesn't mean you couldn't.
That's fair. But you do agree that the continued march against free speech and its acceleration is definitely a risk.
Yeah, I think that that's really bad, because what I feel will ultimately happen is politicians will use it to gain a degree of control over people that ends up being harmful for progress in general, like technological and economic progress. Because there's a lot of ways you can come up with where you could suppress speech for short-term gains at long-term costs.
Mm-hmm. I'm concerned with this idea that everybody wants to be offended and that simply being offended is virtuous. It's like a medal that you wear. You were offended by this thing, you know? And as long as it was like stupid slacktivism, like, what was it? Coney 2010 or whatever, I forget what it was, where everybody was like, I hit a thumbs up on this Facebook post, and so I did my part to help child soldiers in Africa, you know? And it was like, you're an idiot. But it was like, at least you're contained to only hitting a thumbs up. You're not part of the destruction of free speech by doing this, where somebody who goes around and wears as a chest full of medals, like all the times they've been offended and all of the small minority groups that they can cut themselves into in order to say that they're the most special and thus the most aggrieved and the most offended. That, I feel like, is very detrimental. It's detrimental to the ideas of cohesive society, and it's detrimental to just having a happy life and getting along with your neighbors and just being a good person that people want to be around.
Yeah, I think so. But it succeeds really well on internet platforms.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And what if you don't hang out with your neighbors much?
Because they're already so disgusted at how offended you get.
No, maybe you just don't talk to them. But then you're in a position where you sort of are wearing a bunch of internet medals, and you're like, look at how virtuous I am. And everyone on the internet's like, yeah. And that's like your measure of social success.
Yeah. And it has long-term detrimental effects.
I think it could. Yeah.
Yeah. I get perplexed by these things because as I've gotten older, I take a more and more libertarian view to everything.
Yeah.
And so for the most part, I just kind of look at squabbles like this, and I look at people being offended over everything, and, you know, people trying to classify themselves in the smallest group they can so that they can be the most offended. And I just look at all that and I just say, who cares? I don't have time for this. Like, I got to get up at 5 a.m. and go to work. Like, I don't have time to be offended online all the time. You know, I've got kids and a family and I got stuff I got to do. And like, I don't define my existence by begging for adoration from the internet despite having a podcast.
Please donate to us on Patreon.
But more and more, I see these debates and I see these struggles that people create for themselves. And, you know, for instance, when people go talking about religion, it's like, I don't care. I don't care what you worship. I don't care where you worship or how or when or what you teach your children or anything. And most of the reason I don't care, part of the reason is, like I said, I just don't have time to care. But the other part is I understand that by not caring and by not trying to impose my will, I gain the ability to do what I want, to worship how I want with my family, or not worship, or teach my kids or not teach my kids, or whatever. And part of what you're buying by being good to other people is hopefully other people are good back to you. Hopefully you can create a society where you're allowed to live your life and people don't care how you live your life because you've done the same. That's the hope. Maybe it's a bit too passive and it's going to be steamrolled by a bunch of people who are offended by everything. So I don't know if long term that's going to hold up, but that's what motivates me more and more as I get older, is I I can't be so concerned about all of this. And where would I draw the line, you know? Let's say I had a coworker who I disagreed with religiously, and let's say I actually cared, you know, that we had this religious disagreement. Like, do I stop with just him? Or do I find every person who shares his theology, and do I disagree with them too? Do I expend that effort on this?
Oh yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
How far back should I follow the blame chain?
Yeah. And then, like, if there's another sect of that religion, should I disagree with them too and all of the members on an individual basis? And it's like at some point you're going to realize you're consumed by hate and you're wasting a lot of time and energy and stress. And I guess I wish more of the people who get offended by everything on the internet and want to say everything is hate speech, I wish they would come to that realization and just realize the emotional exhaustion that you would have to accumulate from this kind of ongoing campaign.
Yeah, but I feel like you're sort of starting from this basis of like, I religiously disagree with this hypothetical guy, so what rational steps should I take? And I think there you're already off the premise. It's really more like, I kind of disagree with this guy's religion. What positive values can I signal to people that I care about? And so you're like, let's talk about why he's bad and wrong, and therefore why I am good and right. And what else can we say about me? Because really, I'm the most important thing here. And then you would try and like answer that question. Of course, you're not being honest with yourself, so that's not the actual question you're asking, but it's the thing you would be doing.
Yeah.
And so then what you do is you're like, what's the most obvious way to signal this? And yeah, one of the examples I could think of that I thought was really funny is when Ender's Game, the movie, came out and people were boycotting it. And I was like, why? Because it's like child labor, because it depicts like children doing stuff or something. And they're like, no, because the guy who wrote the book is a Mormon and the Mormon church is against gay marriage. And I was just like, that chain of blame just seems too long to me.
How many steps removed from this perceived offense before you would go see the movie? You know, is it like the guy who wrote the book had a yard man who was also the yard man for the director of the movie? Would that be enough separation then? Or would it still be too close? Because you've added one more step.
I don't know. It's almost like, hey, a movie's coming out. Is there something I can signal here? And it's like, yeah, sure, you know, whatever. If you view it through that lens, it seems really obvious. Like, oh, Ender's Game is coming out. Oh, I don't really care about seeing it anyway. And you know what? I can show how much I support gay marriage by saying, let's boycott the movie. Like, there. That's the easy way to think about it. But then people have to, like, explain the chain to you so it doesn't just sound like, let's all pay attention to me and how virtuous I am.
Yeah.
Let's see. It recently happened with, I don't know, that football player who like took a knee to protest something, and then Nike signed him for something, and then people are like, now I don't like Nike or whatever. Or
they like Nike Extra now.
Yeah, sure. I guess, yeah, it goes both ways, right? And you got to signal that you like or don't like Nike, right? You can't be apathetic like we are.
I'm pretty apathetic. I don't know how much Nike stuff I own or the last time I bought a Nike thing.
I had Nike shoes before. I bought some Nike shoes recently. I like them. I just don't care. But yeah, it's like, how far should this chain go? And in general, I think it goes to some big public noticeable thing that you can associate yourself with liking or hating, and it'll signal to everyone else. It doesn't say a whole lot to say, I dislike the director of Ender's Game. I don't even know who that was, because he produced this movie based on a story written by this guy. It doesn't do as much to say I don't like Orson Scott Card, because not as many people are familiar with him. But you could be like, hey, this movie that's coming out, yeah, that's a thing you know about because marketing is happening. And same with Nike. You're like, I don't like Nike. I hope they ask me why. And they're like, why don't you like Nike? And you're like, well, because I'm a really good person. Let me explain to you why I'm such a good person. Or they do like Nike, and you're like, you know, because I'm a good person. I'm better than the other people. And that's really what it comes down to. Oh, also, your argument that you were making about not caring. I feel like I would boil that argument down to, I just think about, how will this increase or decrease liberty?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the only thing I worry about.
I think there's an element of that in my argument that
yes,
that the reason that I get to have my family exist the way that it does, in the way that my wife and I want it to exist, is because we're not spending all of our time trying to thrust our views on everyone else too.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's one of the big parts of libertarianism, is just the golden rule. Just treat people the way you would like to be treated.
Yeah. But one of the problems is that people who want to suppress speech believe that their speech is centrist enough that it would never be suppressed itself.
Yeah.
And so they think that they're exempt from the golden rule, because while they would never want anyone to suppress their speech, they really genuinely don't think it's going to happen, but that they can suppress the speech of others. And they're pretty sure that everyone agrees that speech should be suppressed. And they just don't see any kind of like moral hazard here.
Yeah. It's a difficult subject too, because I feel like gaining a really great appreciation for the value of free speech requires a lot of work to be done, of examining it rationally, of examining history, of examining legal rulings and the jurisprudence, and examining how it is in other countries and what the real effects of that is. And that doing that kind of research and investigation is really hard. But just saying that you like or dislike Nike is much easier, or that you're going to boycott them, or that these subreddits should be banned. Yay. You know, those kind of things don't take much effort at all. It's nearly zero. But really saying, you know, here's these two idiots with their podcast. Maybe I should really try and understand why free speech is important to a functioning modern society. And I'm going to invest 400 hours in study to do that. You know, that's way more commitment than people want to make. And they may accidentally make that commitment over a long period of their life, reading books and, you know, ingesting history and ingesting other subjects and things, and kind of come to those beliefs eventually. But trying to get someone to commit to doing that is impossible.
I think just understanding that the core of it is status and virtue signaling is really helpful.
I think that helps if you're trying to open the eyes of someone who is already rational.
Or somebody who's just like, I find this behavior distasteful, but I don't really know why exactly. And you can put a name on it and an explanation, and it helps them hold it more concretely in their mind. And it's really beneficial too, because then it removes any chance they had of respecting that person more by claiming to get offended at something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The term I've heard for that is raising the sanity waterline. You can just sort of gradually help everyone think a little more clearly about things. And that's really helpful, because that's one of the things that takes away the power of virtue signaling, is if other people just see right through it and don't award that person internet points for doing it. So I still feel like it was reasonable for Reddit to ban those subreddits, unless it affects Supreme Court cases down the line.
I think it was within their power, but I think it is ultimately more detrimental to the cause of free speech than it was beneficial to any type of resolution of hatefulness that they were claiming to achieve.
If you were running Reddit, what would you have done? Ellen Pao steps down. Craig from Fungineering steps up.
I would not have banned them. I probably would have tried to not create an environment where everyone was looking to me as the CEO of Reddit to make these decisions and to make those kind of choices of what content is appropriate and what's not. Because let's be frank, there's a lot of crazy content on Reddit. I mean, if you've ever dived into all the pornographic Reddits, if you've ever seen stuff like selling panties, have you ever seen the selling panties subreddit?
Can't say I have.
Typically women, I guess maybe men do it. I don't know. They wear some panties and they photograph themselves wearing them, and then they put them up for sale and somebody buys them on the subreddit. And, you know, there's every type of crazy subreddit you can imagine. And so that's part of my kind of confusion with all of this is Reddit chose, I forget the number, it was like a dozen or 2 dozen subreddits to ban. And it's like, really? Because I've seen some pretty dark stuff in the corners of Reddit that, let me use this term very loosely, upset me I'm not that easy to upset. But, you know, it was stuff where you're like, man, I bet a lot of people don't like this. And yet it exists here on Reddit, right? And that's one of the virtues of Reddit. That's one of the virtues of the whole internet, is that if you find something that you don't like, you can just move along. And if it makes you upset, then maybe you ratchet things down until you're visiting I'm Going to Hell. And then if you encounter a bunch of content in the I'm Going to Hell subreddit that still upsets you, there's humor subreddits that are even tamer than that, you know? And so when you find this crazy stuff on Reddit, like the stuff that you think is really weird, well, you don't have to look at it. And it can exist there for that community. And we don't find ourselves then challenged with trying to be rational and saying, why should this be banned and something else shouldn't? Where do we draw this line? Because I don't believe there's any rational line being drawn. There's still plenty of subreddits that revolve around one group of people disliking another in some way.
I would guess that they drew the line at something like number of members or reviews or something like that. Because if a subreddit's really objectionable, but it has 5 people in it and it gets 10 views per month, then you don't really care.
Yeah.
Because, like, ultimately the reason they ban these subreddits is because they're afraid of losing advertiser dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a Reddit does not make you afraid of losing advertiser dollars, no action needs to be taken. That's the rational line.
Yeah, for Reddit to take.
What will our advertisers think?
I think what I would have done as CEO of Reddit is try to articulate what I just attempted to, that there is not a rational line that we can draw for the sake of speech. Now, for the sake of advertising dollars, absolutely, yes. I can probably get a couple of engineers to make a nice chart, a summary of what the worst subreddits are for potential advertising dollars. I can get them to do that in a couple of hours or a few days at most.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And then you would ban them?
No, I wouldn't even have them go do that exercise. I would say that, you know, I'm going to base this decision on just the rationality of what's good for speech. And I wouldn't be the CEO for long, but I would at least, you say that, you know, Ellen Powell steps down and Craig from Fungineering becomes CEO. It's going to be a short term.
You unban all the subreddits and then walk away from the smoking crater. Later, stupids.
Well, if you have to have a hill to die on as theoretical CEO of Reddit, that's the one I would. Plus, really, what was the risk to advertiser dollars? I wonder if that was a real risk at the time. Was there some kind of boiling controversy where advertisers were saying, man, there's these deep, dark subreddits that, you know, don't get much attention. And if you don't do something about them, I mean, does Reddit not already control where its advertisements go? Do, like, you know, Hillary for America advertisements go to the Donald subreddit during the election? Is Reddit's advertising algorithm so dumb as to do that? So
probably. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it allows advertisers to blacklist a list of subreddits, but they might find that kind of inconvenient.
Yeah.
YouTube has that with the YouTube Preferred program. That was the thing that PewDiePie infamously got kicked out of when, I don't know, one of his many incidents occurred. And it's sort of a list of known good content creators where it's going to be pretty brand safe to advertise with them. And advertisers are very skittish. They're extremely afraid of their ad running on top of what they deem objectionable content. And
yeah,
it's a battle YouTube's really had to fight, because it's very easy for a video to not look objectionable until you watch the middle 5 seconds of it or something like that, or one particular frame of it screenshots really well. And it turns out that traditional media is very interested in trying to find such screenshots of advertisers advertising on objectionable content on YouTube, because coincidentally, they want the same advertiser dollars to be spent on their media. And so there's a sort of maybe conflict of interest there where they're like, oh, look at how terrible YouTube is. Coke, you wouldn't want your ad running next to this terrorist training video, would you? And then Coke is like, oh no, we better only advertise with whatever paper is breaking the story. it's kind of a dirty fight, but it's a fight that I guess both parties have willingly entered into. But yeah, I feel like I would ban those subreddits because I'm guessing they had advertisers complaining to them perhaps about the specific list that they ultimately banned. And so I'd be like, yeah, sure, we're going to ban them because I don't care. And I don't think it's going to have a huge amount of negative consequences for free speech down the line. But if it did, then I would be in an interesting position there.
I find that I'm unable to get people to agree with my views on this, which makes me wonder what's wrong with my views. Or what's wrong with my ability to persuade people on this issue. I feel like the answer to that may be that I'm taking a absolutist view towards it.
Yeah, I don't think even running Reddit as CEO puts you in a position where you have so much influence over the progression of free speech rights in the world that you should pay an economic cost with your company in order to support them. The other thing is you can ban those subreddits and then you can write your blog post in a way where you're explaining that you're banning them for some other reason. Like, I mean, you can honestly say, like, advertisers didn't want to advertise with them. And then it's like, is that really a free speech problem? Like, advertisers don't want to advertise with lots of content. And I don't think people are like, you know what's really wrecking free speech today? Advertising. Like, maybe some people say that. I guess you could make a compelling argument there. But I don't think that it really is. There's lots of other ways to make money with speech or sell people the ability to amplify their speech or something like that. So I don't think it's a worthy hill to die on.
Okay.
I don't think it moves the needle of free speech progress.
You think instead I should just rake in the sweet, sweet cash of being CEO of Reddit?
Yeah. Are they even profitable?
I don't know.
Probably not.
What do they have to pay for? Tons of bandwidth?
Tons of employees. They have hundreds of employees.
Hundreds? Wow.
Hundreds. Yeah.
Hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sell advertisements. Do they have any like premium subscription you can upgrade to as a user of Reddit?
Reddit Gold, but it doesn't do much.
Oh, but it costs money.
Yeah, it does.
And there's some uptake rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that there could be some skepticism as to whether or not Reddit is profitable. It's purely an advertising business on an internet forum.
It's a hard business model to make work.
Yeah.
So if I change your mind, would you ban the subreddits?
No, I still want it.
Damn it.
Yeah, I'm just an absolutionist on these kind of things. And I feel like, was that the wrong word? Is it it's absolutist, isn't it? Yeah.
Close enough.
I just feel like you can't do those things and, do it over and over again and let Reddit set a precedent and then other sites follow and other sites take it further. And eventually you have a measurable detrimental effect to the cause of free speech.
But if you eventually have a measurable effect, that's implying to me that you don't have a measurable effect yet.
I would not claim that you do. Mm-hmm. But just think if Ellen Powell had took a stand and along with her lawyers and PR people crafted some really good sounding blog post and gave a great reason for why it's important to allow this kind of speech to exist on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
That may have actually had an effect. There may have been a lot of users of Reddit who were convinced of the virtue of the cause of free speech by that.
But there's something really important that those users don't do.
Vote?
No, they don't pay Reddit money.
Yeah.
So she could craft this amazing blog post and then get a global slow clap from all the users of Reddit and then lose $10 million of advertising revenue. And then Reddit goes out of business. And then all speech on Reddit is suppressed forever because it's gone.
Yeah. That's why I'm not likely to ever be the CEO of anything. That's why I'm aiming for chief engineer.
It's okay. I'll be CEO and then I can make these decisions better than you.
That's fine. I'll come be a chief engineer for you. I'll be happy with that.
All right.
As long as I can take a week vacation every 2 months.
Sure.
It's a deal. Just don't suppress my speech, bro.